Howdy, folks. I'm Mark, and today I am joined by Dr. Henry Overos. Dr. Henry, thank you for coming back on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a minute.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for joining me for this short talk about video games. And you're all out there listening to Quick Place. Let's get right into it. Henry brought you here to talk about Marvel Rivals is the newest live service sensation sweeping the video game landscape. We were chatting about it a little bit before this, but we're both fans of the Marvel brand. So if you tried out Rivals, what do you think so far?
Yeah, so I have tried out Rivals. I've played it with a full party of my friends and my brothers.
Oh, nice.
And which is probably the best way to play it because it is definitely a game that requires communication. But I think by now, like pretty much anybody who's into video games would understand like what it is. It's literally Overwatch.
Mm-hmm.
If you, it's a hero shooter, teams, with like tanks, damage, attackers and support, and you're coordinating to, either like take over a base or like push an object through the map, and it just so happens that every character is a Marvel character.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of the selling point is like, who these characters are generally, and you know how Overwatch works. So it kind of just like makes sense that way.
Yeah, it worked out well. And I think it's even, where am I going with this? It's a really interesting stylized style for them. Where everything's kind of, like not edgy is not quite the right word, but kind of just everything looks a little bit edgier. Everything looks a little flashier. Like it's kind of cool redesigns of all these characters in some way.
Yeah. I think so. There is like a story to the game, and it's a different universe in like the Marvel story, right? It's not like the main people. It's not like the normal Captain America. It's like a different one.
Right.
And it's kind of like futuristic too. So there's that. It has that going for it too.
Yeah. One of the joys of it all with Rivals is seeing the success of the more introduction of Jeff, the baby land shark, into the mainstream consciousness. Jeff had a card in Marvel Snap, but this is a new level for him. So you mentioned that you were having fun explaining Jeff, the baby land shark, to people. Could you do a little explainer for the podcast on where he came from, what's his deal? Because he's amazing.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I was saying to you earlier before the podcast started recording, but like the two characters that I've been asked about a lot because people know, like my friends and stuff, like know that I read a lot of comic books.
Yeah.
Like, who is Jeff? Why is he in this Marvel game? And then who is Squirrel Girl?
Yeah.
And like, I think that those are probably like the two most popular characters online, like the ones that are getting the most talked about. And I'm like, oh, like it's Jeff.
Of course.
Jeff. Jeff is a shark that walks on land, and he was introduced in a kind of like not like to non like comic book readers, like a pretty obscure comic book called the West Coast Avengers.
Right.
So there's like the main Avengers, and then there's like other Avengers who just hang out in like LA.
Yes.
And
just chilling out.
They tend to be like slightly off kilter superheroes, like not the ones that are like Captain America and Thor. It's like like Spider-Woman, and these other sort of like canonical Marvel characters who have fans, but they're not like the headliners in the other main stories. And
the C tiers even.
The writer who was working on like I think it was maybe like 10 years ago, her name is Kelly Thompson, and she was writing West Coast Avengers, and she introduced Gwenpool into the West Coast she's like a really she's like a whole other character that you could talk about for like a long time. But
Yes, it's like how do you start to explain Gwenpool and where she came from and everything
yeah,
there?
it's
But
like I'm not even gonna
just gloss
bother.
over
But
it for now. There's
like
Wikipedia.
long story short, they fight a bunch of like mutant sharks in one, and then at the end of the chapter, Gwen keeps one as a pet and names it Jeff. And it's like hanging out at the Avengers, the West Coast Avengers like headquarters, and it literally just becomes like
Yeah,
a pet. And he's just a little shark that walks around on land and like goes on adventures with them. After that comic ended, like a little while later, maybe like a few years later, they started doing online comics through their web service called Marvel
right.
Unlimited.
Yeah,
And one of the comics is Kelly Thompson is writing called It's Jeff. And it sort of is like a Sunday funny paper comic where it's
it
like,
it kind of looks like
there's
a
no,
children's book. Like it's made to
yeah,
look like that in some ways. Yeah,
yeah, the art is very like colorful and simple. It's um, done by these Japanese comic artists named Gurihiru, and so they make it look very cutesy.
hmm
And there's no dialogue, and every chapter just follows Jeff as he does something kind of cute and dumb.
right.
Like he'll go
What's
to a
not to
kid's
love?
birthday party and he'll like accidentally pop the bouncy house, and then he like saves the day somehow by like inflating it in some dumb way, or like
Right.
he like frees animals from a pet shop because he thinks that they're being held captive by the evil pet store owner. And then he has to get them all back because he didn't understand what was happening. Like it's just like it's cute but dumb stuff like that.
Yeah.
And whoever made Marvel Rivals like knew what they were doing, because they were like, oh, this is perfect for this sort of game. Like
Yeah.
you don't really need to know who Jeff is. He's just a cute shark.
Yeah.
And it works so well in the game because it's like in the game, it's like a very intuitive healing character. Like he has bubbles that heal, he can swim, and it turns out that actually he's really powerful and people kind of hate playing against him because he can like kill a whole team. But
Incredible.
it is a lot of fun to play with him on your team. It's pretty cool.
Oh man, one of my favorite Jeff moments in comics is a new Deadpool series that just started. Like in the first issue, Gwenpool randomly shows up and like gets Deadpool to adopt Jeff because she's like all my books keep getting canceled. He's too cute to not like have a consistent like successful book. So can you take him, please? And so
Yes,
Jeff had like a little extra life in Deadpool. Um,
I love that. And honestly, like that's I really like the Gwenpool comics,
I haven't
and
actually read them.
part of it is because she's aware that she's in a comic book, and she's
Yeah.
like, I keep getting canceled. like, like it's actually like part of her story is she's like, oh my god, I don't want to be canceled.
Oh man. Well,
Yeah.
so this is the secret actual topic of the episode, but like how'd you get into reading comics? Like you're a fan, like where'd you start? Like how'd you get into these?
Well, I think probably like a lot of people around our age
hmm
who got into comics, it was through my parents. Like my dad
Okay.
he had a comic collection that he had saved from when he was a kid. So he had comics from like the 70s and 80s. And when I was pretty young, he let me look at them.
Yeah.
Which looking back on it, I'm like, that was a risky move, man. Like giving a kid like some pretty rare comics. And I just started getting really into like the art, because I don't even remember if I started looking at them when I could follow the stories and read them. But like,
Okay. Yeah.
I like loved the Spider-Man villains in them,
Okay.
and he also like had collected all these 80s comic books like Dark Knight by Frank Miller, and Daredevil by Frank Miller was like my dad's
Yeah.
favorite.
Okay.
So I was looking at all these really like crazy comics from the 80s and was just like, wow, this is really wild. And then I didn't really personally get into like collecting comics or reading comics like hardcore until I was much older, because like one of the things that like my dad talks about is like he started stopping reading comics because it got too expensive as a hobby. Like
Sure. Yeah.
you could buy comics for like a quarter at one point, right?
Right.
Like a
Yeah.
long time ago. But now it's like today, an issue of a comic is $5 generally, like four to
Right.
$5.
Yeah.
So I mean, even if you adjust for inflation, like it is a lot of money, and it's a little bit cost prohibitive. So it's not like I was going out and like collecting a bunch of comics as a kid or anything like that.
Sure.
But I will say, like, one of the things that's been really nice, especially since COVID, which is probably about when I started getting back into it, like I was
Okay.
bored at home.
Yeah.
Um,
Naturally.
it's way easier to read comics now with online comic subscriptions
Yeah.
and like comic apps, as well as just having like an iPad
Right.
or even a
Yeah.
Kindle. Like you can
Huh.
read
Okay.
all the stuff on any of those sorts of devices, your phone,
Yeah.
and that just makes it way more approachable. And that's really like the main way that I read my comics. I do like
Nice.
have a comic book store next to me called Victory Comics that I go to with my brother and my friends to pick up comics like every
Yeah.
month,
Yeah.
and I subscribe to like a few that I really care about. But
Sure.
if there's like a story that I'm like kind of tangentially interested in, I'm like, oh, I'll just like pick it up on the one of the apps that like
Right.
I
Yeah.
can subscribe to or whatever.
Yeah.
So
What are you like currently picking up normally? Like, what are those ones you're really into right now? I guess.
yeah, so I'm currently um, so both Marvel and DC actually kind of just soft rebooted a bunch of their stories.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and so I started picking up X-Men comics because a lot of my favorite comic book writers are like writing them, and they've been pretty good. And then so there's like three main X-Men comics.
Okay.
There's the Uncanny X-Men, the X-Men, great name, and
Very
the
creative.
Exceptional X-Men. Like they're all just like
Yeah.
variations.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I also pick up a couple of DC comics. So they just started doing like an alternate universe where they've got like different versions of all their main heroes called the Absolute Universe,
Okay.
and they're all written by like top tier, like the best comic writers out right now. Um, and so I pick up Absolute Batman,
Okay.
which is like, what if Batman was raised working class and was
Hmm.
just as smart as he is in the main comics, and
Sure.
but also like huge, like just like the biggest, like
Okay.
like just like the hugest guy, like he's just literally like beating people to a pulp. And then Absolute Wonder Woman, which is also written by Kelly Thompson, who made Jeff, and
Oh, nice. Yeah.
it's probably my favorite of all of the things that I'm reading right now.
Wow. Okay.
It's like, what if Wonder Woman wasn't raised by the Amazons, but was instead raised in Hades, um, and
Okay.
is like not like evil, like she's still like a hero and everything, but like she's also got this sort of like black magic kind of witch related stuff going on at the same time.
Okay.
And like the vibe of it is kind of goth ish, but it's very
Interesting.
cool, very cool. Art's very good, writing's very good.
Nice.
um,
I
yeah, so those are the main ones.
I did have to look up what Absolute Batman looked like, and he is a unit. Like even the
No,
the
it's
bat symbol on his
it's
chest is like just a thick boy. Like it's a rectangle.
what's even funnier about the bat symbol is that it's like an axe, that like comes
Oh,
off his uniform. Like he can like take it off, and then
that's
like it turns
incredible.
into like a battle axe. It's crazy.
What?
And his
That's incredible.
Batmobile is like a construction vehicle, like a dump truck. It's just like this massive truck.
Man,
It's so funny. It's so over the top and like really ridiculous. But
that's great.
very, very cool to read. So I'm enjoying that.
Oh, that's
Do
great.
you read anything?
I do. So I got into it actually through the MCU. Like, so my parents were not at all comic readers. I watched like Spider-Man as a cartoon. I like enjoyed superheroes as a kid, but it was really like getting into Iron Man through the movie, and then when Avengers came out, that was when I was kind of all in. So I subscribed to Marvel Unlimited in college, and that's kind of been the way I've consumed comics off and on since then. I started with like the first comic run I read was like the ongoing Avengers comic at the time, because of course I just watched Avengers. I wanted to read those, which was Jonathan Hickman's run. That began in 2012, which is a great book, but it is
crazy.
It is dense. It's crazy. It's complex.
Jonathan Hickman is not like for people listening who don't know about comics, like Jonathan Hickman is this like very like high concept sci-fi type writer, and he keeps getting these like writing jobs, writing like just mainstream comics, and he'll be like, what if like the X-Men were completely different and it was super bonkers and like totally off the walls, and everybody who's reading it is just like, I guess we're just dealing with this now. Like, I guess this is
I really enjoy his stuff, but it is dense, and it's kind of like I'm getting 65% of what's going on here. I think the rest of it I'm just in here for the ride. And so I've enjoyed a lot of things that Jonathan Hickman does, but that was a trial by fire as like a first way to get into comics.
What a wild introduction.
It's
like one of the most dense comics I've ever. I haven't even finished it because like there's so much happening in that comic. It's hard to follow sometimes.
Yeah. Oh man. So I'm like, so Marvel Unlimited now they're on a run of comics that were released 3 months. After 3 months, they'll get added to Marvel Unlimited, and so I'll kind of like keep up with stuff there. There's a few occasional things that I'll pick up every so often. Like I bought the actual comic books of Way of X, which is kind of within that Jonathan Hickman X-Men line as a little miniseries. But I wanted to shout out a few of my favorite books, and I'll ask you for some of yours. But all-time favorite comic run is the 2012 Hawkeye by Matt Fraction and David Aja.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
That's a good one.
Yes. Oh, man. It's so unique. Like, the visuals are so unique. That's actually the Hawkeye TV series is, like, heavily based off of this.
Yes.
Kate Bishop's also a big factor in it.
Mm-hmm.
Worth
Kate
checking
Bishop
out.
Also partial, like, owner of Jeff. Like, Jeff
Oh, that's true. House. Yeah, she was part of that West Coast team. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh man. That's also like, I would actually say that's a great comic book to start with if you like have never read Marvel comics and just want a place to start. Like, you don't need to know much, just get into it, enjoy the art. I really enjoyed Vision from 2015 by Tom King.
Tom King. I love Tom King.
I don't really know much of the other stuff. What else has he done? Like,
he wrote a couple of big DC.
Okay.
So the one that he's like most recently famous for is Super Girl, Woman of Tomorrow? Let me check.
Okay. Did he do some Batman? I feel like that his name gets tossed around a lot with.
Oh yeah, he did. He had a whole Batman run.
Okay.
He's writing Wonder Woman right now. He's written Black Canary, but he's like kind of known for being like having like this emotional beat to his stories that are kind of unusual for comics. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, the Vision, also kind of a weird high concept book and also kind of dark, but I enjoyed it. It's fascinating stuff. And it's like, it's awesome. And again, that kind of went into the WandaVision series a little bit too. It's like, as an influence.
Definitely. Yep.
I really enjoyed Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil from 2019 is another big one that I like a lot. A miniseries I wanted to shout out was Black Panther versus Deadpool from 2018 by David Kibblesmith. It is.
Oh, I haven't read that one.
It is surprisingly deep for like, it's got all the goofy stuff you would expect from like a Deadpool comic, but it's also at the same time like the main thrust of it is like T'Challa as Black Panther discovers kind of like the secret to immortality, or can discover it, and is like wrestling through the ethics of like, should I like be an immortal person if I'm a noble man, and kind of wrestling through like, am I a noble man? Like, would I be noble if I am immortal? And like while he's wrestling through this, you also have Deadpool, who is functionally immortal, like not deserving of it, just a wild man of craziness, and like steals is coming in to like steal vibranium and stuff. And so it's a goofy time, but also like really thoughtful at the same time too. I also enjoyed Jonathan Hickman's X-Men stuff with the Krakoan age. I really didn't pay attention to X-Men stuff until this, because the MCU didn't care about X-Men, and I regret that now.
Sad but true. Yeah.
And now more recently, I wanted to go back. I'm in the middle of rereading the Avengers run from Jonathan Hickman, but I started with his Fantastic Four from back in 2009, and kind of his run with side run of FF. That is got me really excited for the Fantastic Four movie coming out. And so I'm trying to reread all of his stuff leading up to Secret Wars. So that's where I'm at right now. But yeah, how about you? Any favorites that you've got?
Well, first I just want to say those were all really great picks. I hadn't read a couple of the ones you mentioned, but like the ones you mentioned that I have read, like they're all pretty good jumping on points, especially for people who may be interested in comics, but don't like know where to start or what to look at.
Sure.
So in terms of like some of my favorite comics, I do love that Matt Fraction Hawkeye. It's very good. But I really love old school, not completely old school, not Stan Lee X-Men, but the like late 70s all the way through like 1991 or so X-Men by Chris Claremont.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where the majority of like X-Men stories that people have heard about, that's where that comes from. He basically was given free reign to write X-Men however he wanted. He like created or co-created most of the characters as X-Men. He expanded the cast of X-Men to the point where they needed like 5 comics to tell stories about all of them. Hence there's like currently 12 X-Men comics.
Right.
But as like a good, like, I just want to know like kind of what comics used to be like and what are these famous stories. Like around Uncanny X-Men 130 is when the Dark Phoenix saga starts. And that's just like such a good run of comics for like multiple years, just like hit after hit after hit of good stories and good art. So that's one that I really love.
To interject really quick too, I have not read those, but I really enjoyed X-Men 97, the show. Apparently that's also kind of like the abridged version of a lot of like Claremont stuff. A lot of these like big moments condensed down.
If you like X-Men 97, the show, I would highly recommend his like side comic called New Mutants. That has a lot of the non like main cast of the X-Men, but they eventually sort of like become a part of the X-Men canon. Like I think Sunspot is one of the characters in X-Men 97, and there's, I don't know, it's just like a really cool artistic and fun read.
Nice.
And it introduces like other characters who show up in Marvel Rivals, like Magic is in that a lot, and people like that. So in terms of more recent ones, I really do love Tom King's Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Which is like a character study on a somewhat lesser known superhero, like Superman's cousin. And it's just like following her on like a singular mission as she like travels through space to get revenge. It's a great read. In terms of more recent stuff, I've really been enjoying the Birds of Prey comics.
Okay.
So Birds of Prey is DC, and it's like a bunch of female superheroes. So like the Black Canary, Barbara Gordon, like Gordon from Batman, his
Right.
daughter.
Commissioner
Sometimes she's
Gordon.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Commissioner Gordon. Sometimes she's Batgirl.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and like a bunch of other sort of like B tier female superheroes from the DC universe. Like they come together and they form like a team. And usually their stories are a little bit weirder
Sure.
and more kooky. But those were really fun. And the most recent run of that is written by Kelly Thompson. Again, she just keeps popping up.
Yeah.
She's just
Yeah,
writing
yeah.
so much stuff. Um,
Like Jeff. She
and
keeps popping up.
and I would honestly, I would say Gwenpool is a really great, probably one of my favorites. I think it's called, I forget what the original one is called. It might be called. Um, it's not. I get it confused because there's Unbeatable Squirrel Girl,
Right. Which that's
and then
apparently that's
there's.
also like incredible.
Oh, it's hilarious!
I need to actually read
It's
that one
so
too.
funny. Actually, a comic that I'm really loving right now is still ongoing. It's the current Fantastic Four. It's
Yes.
by
By Ryan North.
Ryan North,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it is just, oh man,
yeah.
it's exactly the kind of thing that I want. It's like every comic is sort of like a standalone story.
Mm-hmm.
There's a long sort of overarching story occurring,
Yeah.
but it's like emotional, it's funny, it's
Yeah.
high concept sci-fi, like all at once, and the art is really good. Like everything about it I love. So
Yes.
that's another great one.
Between that run and like Hickman's Fantastic Four, like Mr. Fantastic is kind of becoming one of my favorite characters to like read because he's just fascinating because he's like super cerebral, like still trying to be a family man. Hickman's is more of like the like Reed's a jerk, but he's burdened by like this purpose of saving the world, but he's like mean to his wife, but like always comes back and like. But at this, now with Ryan North, it's kind of more like he's still that, but also more of a family man. But also he leans more into just Mr. Fantastic's powers of being made of rubber, and
Yeah.
just the number of panels where it's like Mr. Fantastic stretches his eyeballs to like look at something. Like there's his eyeballs themselves are in like an S shape as he looks like at a
He
squirrel
holds
in a
his
tree.
eyeballs
Yes.
like they're binoculars,
Yes.
and it's so funny for no reason. It's
So
so great.
weird, but hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite comic storylines is from the Jonathan Hickman Fantastic Four run that you're talking about, and it's
Yeah.
like in every other universe, Reed Richards is, or Mr. Fantastic is evil. He's like an evil jerk.
Right.
And so they have to get all of Reed Richards' enemies in a room to figure out how to beat him because like an army of evil Reed Richards are coming.
Yes. Right.
And so like there's this great scene of like they're serving dinner and like Doctor Doom and the Mole Man,
Yes.
like all of these like old
Yeah.
evil villains from like way back in like the 60s and 70s are like in a room like, how do we actually kill this guy? And he's in the room with them like, I don't like this. Like this makes me uncomfortable.
Right. Oh man. Like I think like Susan Storm's also there like serving them dinner. And it's like I hate that we have a bunch of villains in our kitchen. Like why are they all here?
Yeah, it's so funny though.
Like please explain to me
Yeah.
why these guys are here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. But yeah, so I like to sum up what I was saying. Gwenpool's great. Fantastic Four, like the most recent one, is great. Some of the recent DC stuff, like Birds of Prey and the Absolute series, they're all really good. Good entry points for people who are curious. And also, like, again, you don't have to like, if you don't have a comic book store, if you don't know how to get comic books like physically, you can just subscribe to one of these services for like a month and just see if
Yeah.
you like it. Or you can buy trade paperback versions of these on Amazon or from like local bookstores, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely recommend Marvel Unlimited as like a cheap option, but I also recommend picking up a few physical copies. I kind of treat it as like buying the vinyl of an album I like that I've listened to mostly on Apple Music. Like, this is mostly stuff I've read, like, but I bought the hardcover trade of Hawkeye at Mackey's bookstore one time.
Nice.
That was very exciting to find that. But yeah, as we kind of wrap up here, what would you suggest? Like, anything else that would be, if you're trying to get into comics, like, what's a piece of advice that you have to push forward?
Yeah, so I would say, like, first off, comics aren't just superheroes. So there's a whole world of comics out there. If you're not interested in superheroes, there's a bunch of stuff out there. There's also comics not from the US, so like France, Japan, also known for like completely different styles of comic book storytelling. And I think that it's really easy to get into comics now. And the final thing I would say is that, like, sometimes you want to like really dig into a story and be like, I don't know how to jump in. There's literally like 1,000 Spider-Man comics. Like,
right.
Where do I start? What do I do? My advice is, don't think about it all as like one big continuous story. Just like pick up a comic by a specific author, and if you don't like it, put it down and then pick up another version of that comic by a different author. Because like 100 people have written Spider-Man. Right. You're not going to like all of them, but you might like one a lot. And I think that that's like the better way to approach it, rather than being like, oh, well, I like Mr. Fantastic, so I have to read every Fantastic Four comic. It's like, no, some Fantastic Four comics are really bad.
Right.
And you don't need to read them.
Exactly. That's a good word. And also a good reminder that there's more out there, because I'm definitely in my Marvel silo. And like, kind of like you're saying, that's kind of all I have capacity for. And so, but I'm really into it. So I'll just keep diving deeper. One thing I learned is like, you just kind of have to keep going. Like, if you'll pick up more context clues as you go. If you don't get something, just keep moving forward. Usually the comic tells you everything that you need to know, and everything else is fluff. So just keep on trucking through.
Definitely.
And also look up YouTube explainers. Like, that's, if there's like I don't get what happened here, start, like you're saying, like, pick it up. And if you don't enjoy it, just watch a 15-minute YouTube video that tells you everything you need to know.
100%. Although be careful, because sometimes people will just like spoil a bunch of stuff.
Yes.
So yeah.
It's
my wife Googled something about a book she's reading, and the Google AI like spoiled the book for her.
Oh no.
Because you know how now when you search on Google, it like it starts like auto filling with the Gemini. The Gemini like answered her, but then also like continued to go on and
kept
tell
going.
Her.
No, stop! Please stop! No.
Gotta be careful on the internet.
Yes. And one final encouragement I would say too is like, enjoy the art. I feel like the first years I read comics, like, I was just reading text bubbles and was reading basically short stories and not actually like digesting the art, because some of the art is amazing and takes a lot of time. Yeah. If
you want to see like how wild comic book art can get, like the New Mutants that I was talking about.
Okay.
I think like it's issue 18. They get a new artist, and it's the craziest art in a comic I'd ever seen. Blew my mind. It went from being like, oh, okay, these are just like people on a page, to like, this is some abstract, crazy stuff happening. Like, it's bonkers. Yeah. So highly recommend.
All right. Well, we can wrap up here, but before we go, one important question. One name, one game. What are you playing?
I'm playing Marvel Rivals.
There you go. I played a little bit of Marvel Rivals, but not really that much.
I'm bad at it. I'm very bad at it.
I don't even know what's going on. But really, I'm playing Bachalo. That's what's going on. I know what's there.
Heck yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening in. You can follow us on major podcasting services. We're on YouTube, and you can press all the good buttons there if you enjoy the conversation. You can find us on the proper socials at Quick Play Pod, and let us know. I had something stuck in my throat as I was trying to wrap up here. But what's your favorite Marvel comic series? But that is all the time we have for today. Thanks. Bye.